Welcome to Syntax. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Front End Happy Hour podcast.
Welcome to this week's JS Party.
Live from Shipshape Studios, this is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot, with your hosts, Robbie the Wagner and me, Charles William Carpenter III.
That's right, Charles. We drink whiskey and talk about web development. I mean, it's all in the name. It's not that deep.
This is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot. Do not adjust your set.
Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot is brought to you by Wix. We're big fans of Wix here on the show. We've had Yoav and Emmy on before, on episode 98. If you're interested in more about Wix, definitely check that episode out. But I'm here today specifically to talk to you about the new Wix Studio. Digital marketers, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less when you manage projects on Wix Studio. Work in sync with your team on one canvas, reuse templates, widgets, and sections across sites, create a client kit for seamless handovers, and leverage best-in-class SEO defaults across all your Wix sites. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio to see more. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot with your hosts, Robbie the Wagner and Charles William Carpenter III.
Zippity-doo-dah.
With our guest today, Philip Winston. What's going on, Philip?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, for folks who may not have heard of you, could you give a few sentences about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a software developer from the era before the web existed. I guess right when I was graduating from college, the web was hitting 90, 95. So Yahoo existed, but it was like run out of their dorm room and years before Google existed. But yeah, so most of the development I did for like 20 years was what you call, I guess now, desktop or no-end development or something. And yeah, I did that for many years. And then more recently, I have gotten into like cloud stuff and web stuff. And terrifyingly, I'm doing a tiny bit of front end right now. So maybe you guys can debug it for me. But yeah, mostly, I would guess these days you'd say mostly back end. So.
Yeah. So you wrote software that ended up on multiple floppy disks on the shelf at
I missed floppy. I think the first one was definitely had CDs for a while. Yeah. I think we had FTP sites. So like, yeah, if you had an update, you just, put it in. Like, what folder of the FTP site should I put it in,
It's very secure.
Yeah, those were fun days.
We had, but just many projects with zero online component. There was like, you shipped it, they installed it, then 6 months later, you shipped it again.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Which is nice. Like, you don't have to do this like, oh, I could always be a little bit better. You could just like, nope, it's out.
Yeah.
The QA was a little more intense, because you were letting it go. And so I remember at one place, they would have like a clock and they would start it and they would need to do, 50 hours of use with zero bugs or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And like, if you had a bug, you'd restart that clock. And
wow.
Because, it's kind of got to work.
Yeah, for sure. It's like hard to know. And then once you get it in someone's hands and you get that, bug report or whatever else, you're like, oh, crap. Well, looks like it's going to be a few months for you, buddy. Hopefully you can get as far as you can.
Yeah, I guess they would have like a hot fix and they would maybe send the DVD or the CD to the person who reported the bug or whatever.
Yeah.
So there was ways. But yeah, it was definitely... I know at games these days, when you install it, it's just like applying updates and it downloads like 5 gigabytes.
Yeah. And you're like, I didn't even opt into this. Why is this I just wanted to play FIFA again.
Yeah. That was a big problem when I used to live kind of out in the country and I had no internet really. So I would be like, all right, I'm going to install this game. And then it's like, all right, 70 gigabytes of updates now. Well, I'll play this like next week, I guess. But anyway, go into the whiskey for us there, Chuck.
Alrighty. It's the primary reason why Philip agreed to be here, so I should move forward with that. So today we're having the
twist off.
Yeah, nothing but the best for you.
About that. That doesn't seem authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because I've had other ones of theirs, and I think this is the first one that's a twist off. So, like, okay, well, so be it. The Medley Brothers Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. This is 102 proof. It is not age stated, but since it's a bourbon, it's got to be at least 4 years old. The mash bill is 77% corn, 10% rye, 13% malted barley. So, yeah, it should be pretty, like, it should have a decent amount of sweetness or whatever to it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Smells like bourbon.
Yeah, it's got and with that much corn, it actually has like kind of a wood forward to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask for help on these tasting notes. It doesn't make it all to me.
It seems as if it is made of alcohol for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, it does have a scent that's very different from, say, beer or wine or vodka or something.
For sure, but it's not a completely different vernacular, I don't think. I think, like, whatever things within that domain you might use as part of that language, and we try to agree, this one's leathery or this one's earthy or whatever that kind of in the wine world, you get a lot of, like, earthiness and cherries and berry things and stuff like that, but...
My daughter is just back from college, and she's 19, but they're letting her pour at the winery where she's worked for many years. And so she's not supposed to drink it, but she's allowed to do the tastings. And she says the trick is just claim to know every wine.
That's funny.
Yeah. You can influence people.
Thing.
Just be like,
yeah,
hey, it tastes like this.
Can.
And like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because I smell a little cinnamon and...
Yeah, a little bit.
There was a kind of a...
I mean, it just smells like corn to me. Like creamed corn.
I'm after yesterday's
the smells
corn.
were subtle, but the taste obliterated my taste.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, I almost get like maybe more like nutmeg, a little bit of orange rind, like orangey to it. And then, yeah, it's definitely warm going down. You can feel the proof in that. So, yeah, it couldn't be completely easy on you, Philip. I need to give you kind of a high proof but high corn. Let's go like straight traditional bourbon and see where it goes. It's not bad, though. Yeah, there's another element there that I'm not quite getting, but definitely some spicy kind of nutmeg and a little bit of orange. And I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I get there another sip.
I think the last time I had whiskey was maybe like 2 years ago, and I was in Toronto for work, for an offsite, and I was at the hotel bar. It's like a beautiful old bar, like with a clock or something like that, fancy clock. And I had Wayne Gretzky whiskey.
Oh, okay.
Because it was on the menu, and I was like, hey, I'm in Canada. So.
Yeah, when in Rome, have as the Roman.
I think it's fairly low end. I don't know, but it was fine.
Yeah, well, probably would have been a Canadian rye. That'd be weird for them to serve you something else, but you never know with old Wayne. He used to be a part owner of the Phoenix Coyotes, and I live in Phoenix, so that's the correlation there. That said, I never met him or drank his whiskey. So, Phil, I know you said, and do you mind if I call you Phil?
Feels good.
Okay. I know you said you've listened to a few episodes, so you may be familiar with our highly technical rating system, 0 to 8 tentacles. Ironically, there are 9 tentacles in that system, but as developers, we like to be index-based. So 0 is horrible. You didn't spit this out, so maybe it doesn't qualify there for you. 4 is kind of middle of the road, not bad, not great. 8 is clear the shelves. All you're going to drink is plastic cap Medley Brothers moving forward. I was surprised by that also myself. I was like, I didn't think, okay. They're kind of making this seem a little lowbrow, but I don't know. It's not bad. So yeah, that is the rating system. You can rate it against bourbons, whiskey in general, spirits. It kind of doesn't matter. We tend to split it up for us because we have so much whiskey. I'll rate this against other bourbons. But yeah, it's all kind of like, it's the Wild Wild West out here. So, and Robbie will show you how it's done.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I don't know. This one doesn't have a lot of different notes for me. I feel like they've really hit, standard bourbon on the head. It's like, I don't have a complaint about it really, but I'm also not like, oh, that's an interesting flavor, So yeah, I'm going to give it right middle of the road at a 4 and say like, not bad, not great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's respectable. Do you have any thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I would give it a 5 just based on I like it. but I can't really explain where it would fit in between other whiskeys I've had. But I like it.
Yeah. That's respectful. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I feel. I agree in general, like as an expression of just regular bourbon, like this isn't bad. It's actually pretty affordable, except for when you express ship it to someone in 2 days, and then it kind of doubles in price. But that's someone else's fault, not theirs. Yeah, like to me, I think this would be really good, like in eggnog or in a like kind of wintry themed cocktail. And it's fine sipping it on its own too, like no problems there. I'll just arbitrarily pick and go right between both of your ratings. I'll say it's a 4.5. Would have it again, wouldn't necessarily seek it out. In this price point, like things like Buffalo Trace are tastier. And if you want something sweeter, then Maker's Mark does it really well. So I can't say that it beats either of those, but it's a decent bourbon on its own.
Yeah, it definitely has that warmth and like comforting kind of flavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that spice for me isn't like summer cocktail. I'm going to do something with this. It makes me feel like I want something like a little richer and like stick to your bones kind of thing with it. I don't know. Whatever that means. I still can't pick up the third flavor. Whatever I'm getting out of this thing, I feel like there's another thing there, and it's just kind of, I don't know. We'll see if it springs to mind as we chat.
Should we do some hot takes?
We should do some hot takes. I feel like Phil's going to have a different perspective on our hot takes. I'm very curious. So.
The WTF perspective.
Yeah. WTF on all of them. Feel free with that.
Yeah. So you did say you'd done a little bit of front end. So if these don't apply, let me know, but we'll just ask them anyway. For TypeScript, do you use inferred types or explicit types?
I have not used much TypeScript, but based on what you're saying there, in other languages is, we've seen the gradual typing with Python and stuff, is if the project is big, I would want to use explicit types. And if the project is small, I would not bother using them.
Seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
How about git rebase or git merge?
Yeah, I've done git merge everywhere except one place. And the rebase was kind of cool because, I was just constantly collapsing my changes down to one commit. I don't know if that's the only way to do it, but, that was the rule. You had to basically rebase in one commit, not a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And in the end, though, that felt just like busy work in a way. I've heard of places where you actually need to like groom your commits to tell a story. Like I refactored, then I added my feature perfectly, and then I added my tests perfectly. That sounds cool, but I've never done that either. So I think typically I would just, if I was setting up a project or setting a standard, I would just do merge commits.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's very, I don't know, it's like a holy war, but it's also like kind of pointless because I like rebasing so that I can have that clean history. But then like, why, right? Like how often am I going and looking at that history? And if I am, how often am I actually needing to like narrow down between like certain commits, like what was what or whatever? Like I don't have that problem that often. So it's just like an OCD thing for me. Like I want it to be clean, but I don't really need it to be.
Or the 2 times it helped you were like, I'm glad
I guess I would say everywhere though does squash when you do the PR. So that I think is, I think if you didn't squash and everyone had these commits that are like, tried this, it didn't work, tried that, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
But as long as you're squashing, it's like your story is your story and then it gets squashed into.
Yeah, you can have all this bullshit kind of, I'm saving my work, oh, this sucked,
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there can be a little of that. And then when you go even more stringent to like what you were mentioning, like more of like a conventional commits or whatever else, where like the human English language in your commit message has to be a very perfect and specific format because there are hooks that use that to control your semantic versioning and releases. In theory, sounds good. On the other hand, is like you're dependent on humans to all act the same way and do this same thing. And that has always been like my stopper from wanting to do that. Like in theory, that sounds good, but there's all this like extra overhead and pre-commit hooks that make sure it follows the formatting and you're just like, fuck you, I just want to save.
Yeah.
I worked somewhere where the most senior engineer, we had all these discussions about the quality of the commit message and all that. This was actually Perforce pre-Git. But then, the most senior person would check in like 2 a.m. and the commit message was like FIXE. I don't know why he put the E on there. It was just and that was the entire message.
Yeah, that's just trolling somebody probably. Trying to drive someone crazy.
Yeah.
It's fair.
All right. So in JavaScript, let or const?
Yeah, I have done a little with that. Because I probably am coming from C++, const sounds like a good idea to me. In C++, it's like maybe it's helping out the compiler, but part of it's just kind of a documentation in a way. Like, I don't intend to change this thing, so I probably would use const.
Yeah, it has this like readability about intention and your code being more readable and not needing so many comments to explain what's going on. Always seemed logical to me, but people have to have things to fight about on Twitter. So.
Yeah, I don't know what the argument for let was. It was recent, though. They were like, you should use let everywhere. And I was like, why? That sounds stupid.
Wasn't that the way Ember was for a while, though? It was like let everywhere for whatever reason. Like,
I don't think it was required. It might have been in the blueprints just because, like...
Yeah.
Will I get in trouble if I drop some ice into it?
Yeah, you're going to ruin that
no, it's
highly exclusive bottle. No, you've tried it the right way. You can do whatever you want now.
Now you do it as you enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. A long time ago, I used to give Robbie a hard time about that because he would start that way. And it's like, you're not tasting anything. You're getting everything watered down. You don't really know how much ice to put in or whatever else. Yeah, it was consistent. Consistent slushies. Because he would do crushed ice too. It was like, what? This is like whiskey slushies. No wonder you
guys
have like
do the cube ice and the clear ice and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I've dabbled
although
with
I can't
the clear
say
ice,
yeah. I got obsessive for a little while. I do the drops sometimes too when trying things. So if you add just a couple of drops first, if you taste it first as is, then you try a second time, but after you've added a couple of drops of water, that opens up, adds more oxygen, that kind of thing, a little quicker. And then your third thing can be adding some cubes. But
I did go to a bar in Seattle, and they had the vodka purifying distillery on the bar, and it was like amazing. At least it seemed amazingly good. Like just very different. It had a martini, and it was just like, wow, this actually tastes good. Like,
yeah, I mean that's so funny about like the better the vodka, the less it tastes like anything. It's kind of funny, and then you get a nice buzz. I don't know, kind of a win-win in that way. Maybe that's why. For a while, vodka crushed whiskey throughout like the late 70s and 80s. Anyway,
yeah, now it's back.
Back again, tag team. Cool. Oh, more hot takes. That's what we're doing. A couple of these don't apply. But what do you think about nested ternaries?
I'm a big fan of ternaries, but nested ternaries I would not do myself. I would prefer to break it out into some intermediate variable with a name and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a line you would not cross. But that line is different yours? For different people.
It is, yeah. Some people think they're like super clever and they're like, but this is less lines of code and that's why I'm better.
Yeah, but if you can't read it,
I mean, I guess I would think about, like in C++, I would think in my head that this is not hurting the runtime at all because I know it's just, the lines of code or the number of variables, those don't really matter to the compiled code. And so I would know that I'm just like breaking it out. I mean, I guess I would go so far as to like, even if it's a complex conditional, not this or this and not that, like I would potentially break that up into like, is frozen equals this. And then you could say, if not frozen and not whatever, like in my opinion, like people that are too smart, they write bad code because they're like compiling it in their head, And I've worked with like PhD types, and I'm just like, you need to tone it down a little bit.
You're right. Yeah. You're like, your target audience is yourself. And that's not going to work in a team environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what is that like? I think it's like De Morgan's Law or something where if you find yourself like Googling De Morgan's Law and trying to, it's like, no, just spell it out.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right. You got one more, Robbie. Can you do it?
Guitar Hero or Rock Band?
That's a trick question.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's a very trick question. If I explain the whole history, you'll see that that's diabolical because they really both have the same origin. But I only really played Guitar Hero heavily. We had Rock Band for the Xbox 360 maybe, and so we had the drums and the kids played it and it was cool. But yeah, I personally only really grooved on one person, one guitar. No, I guess you do battles. You could have two people battling. But yeah, the whole band only came together very rarely in my view. Like everyone was usually one person was the anchor or the whatever you call it, the ball, slowing everyone else down. You know,
right, of course.
So it's hard to get one person that could sing well and drum well. And
the singing was hard because it it's subjective. I feel like you'd think you get the note right, and it's like no, like. But
well, before they made that, they made Karaoke Revolution. They had several iterations of that, and that was pretty fun, I thought. Again, I think because it was focused. It would be one singer, and it'd be like a party, and you'd have one person up there singing, and they would either tank or not tank. Like that was kind of fun. Somehow the whole band, I'm sure it's awesome when it works, when you have that trio. But yeah, that's asking for a lot, I think.
Yeah, getting it just right. I did it with my brothers a few times. It's fun when it kind of works out, but you do have to keep going down that path to try and find the song, find the thing that all works.
You gotta have band practice.
We've been drinking. Yeah, and then we've been drinking, and so it's it's good, it's getting better. Oh, now it's terrible. We might as well just quit. Okay.
Well, I think plastic instruments are due for a revival at some point. I think it was cool, but it was also a long time ago, and so it feels like. I don't know what someone's going to do differently to make it fresh, but it feels like that's an idea that could resurge in some point.
Yeah, some form of doing that within the VR world or something seems like it'd be really fun because then you can do that from different locations. That's kind of neat. And there's small accessories that now help that out. I had done a lot of mini golf with my brothers, and because we're in different places, mostly one brother, but we're in different places, and so it would be easy to just jump on from our houses and play a game of mini golf together. And I think that's a lot of fun. And you can get some accessories to make the little controller a little heavier so it feels right. So I don't know what version of that would be, but I think in a VR world it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I played the mini golf with a friend, but it's the kind of thing where this is awesome, but we never did it again. So I don't know.
It's more of a novelty.
And VR in general is kind of like that. I loved it, but I also don't put it on very much at all. I'll go 6 months without putting it on. But my favorite experience was probably Super Hot for VR. I don't know if you guys played it or not. But
Super Hot. I can't recall.
So it's pretty clever. It was clever on the PC, and it just happened to translate over perfectly. It got even better which is not true. A lot of games, I played a sword fighting game in VR, and it really doesn't work because it has no way to stop your hand, right? So
keep swinging through.
I mean, you visually hit the guy, but you went right through it, and so. But yeah, Super Hot works perfectly because in the fiction of the game, the other characters are made of glass, and so you can punch them, and they just burst into shards of glass, which is reasonable for the haptics and stuff like that. So they're not asking they're not asking the system to do something it can't do. But basically, the trick is when you freeze, all the enemies freeze. Time doesn't progress as long as you don't move, and then if you move, they all move kind of at the amount you move. So it's like a action game / puzzle game because you're there, you're frozen. You have a gun, there's 3 guys. You're okay, or maybe you have 2 guns, right? You're I'm going to get this guy with my right hand and this guy with my left hand, and then I'm going to headbutt the third guy or whatever. It just makes you into an action hero, a slow motion action hero.
That kind of sounds fun.
It does sound fun.
Trying that.
Yeah.
I had the same experience with VR. You get real hot on something and maybe play it a couple of times, and then you're oh yeah, well I can't this week, and then it just kind of sits there for a while. Yeah,
it makes me dizzy and sick sometimes. I can't just play it for a long period of time like I could a normal computer game or whatever.
No, I can only play it for 15, 20 minutes because basically if I don't crank the helmet tight, then it wobbles, and if I do crank it tight, then I can only do it for 10, 15 minutes. So it's
oh yeah,
it has to be a lot lighter, I think, to really take off. 10x lighter, which is going to take them a number of years to do.
Yeah, a little while.
They'll just get us the brain implants, and it'll just all show up in your eyes. You don't need anything.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Cutting into my body.
You're not going to sign up for that?
Not quite. I mean, I really liked...
You're not going to sign up for the beta, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I didn't buy the Vision Pro when it was released, and I'm sure as hell not going to buy the Surgical Pro or whatever ends up in my body, you know? I mean, I did like the $6 Million Man, but there was a lot of benefits to that, right? Like how fast and how much he could jump. And then he also had already lost those legs, so what are you going to do?
I'd forgotten about the $6 million man.
Is that, or like there's a RoboCop analogy, right? Like basically he was on the fringes of death. It's almost like Darth Vader, because when RoboCop, like he lost his arms, he was dying, all of that kind of stuff, didn't hardly have any parts left. And they saved the brain and then put it all in this robot. It's kind of like Anakin in Star Wars.
Yeah, I saw a clip online of some show or movie that I've not seen, but it was that situation. The guy's all that's left was his head, and everything else was mechanical, and he was just like, "Kill me."
Right?
He's
Yeah.
like, "I don't want to be here."
I don't want this. That's true. I guess that's kind of the dilemma that occurred when there was more self-awareness from RoboCop. He remembered who he was, and then he was like, "I don't want this."
What was that movie I'm trying to remember with like a robot like that? You know the band De Antwoord? It's like a South African band.
Can't say I do. No.
The two singers appeared in this movie. I'm trying to remember what it was. Anyway, it was one of these, a robot discovers himself and becomes conscious kind of movies. And the gimmick was they like fell in with essentially the street gang. And so the street gang teaches the robot to be kind of a badass and like commit crimes and stuff like that.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
Kind of a B movie, I guess.
Oh, I see. Okay. But would recommend? Once you remember the name?
Cool. It was not as it's one of those movies that got me suckered in where I liked the trailer. Like I'm like, this looks like a cool movie. Like there was a moment where they had bottles hanging down and he threw throwing stars and like, you know, hit the throwing star into every bottle. You know, with his robot powers. And I was like, this looks cool. But then when you see the actual movie, you're like,
It's okay.
They picked the best 45 seconds already.
Do you think he was programmed using object-oriented programming or functional programming? Because it sounds a little more functional to me.
It was some kind of a brain meld thing. I can't remember what the claimed technology was.
This just in, Whiskey.fund is now open for all your merch needs.
That's right, Robbie. We're hearing reports of hats, sweaters, and t-shirts, as well as a link to join our Discord server.
What's a Discord server?
Just read the prompter, man.
Hit subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends about our broadcast.
It really does help us reach more people and keeps the show growing.
All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Did you see Ex Machina? That's a good one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They claim the brain was structured gel or something. Like it was a metamaterial or something like that. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
mixed organic matter kind of thing.
yeah, it was like, oh, we can't possibly make AI unless we have this very exotic, you know, brain. And then like here a couple of years later, like, oh, no, you just needed like a GPU.
What you need are a bunch of graphics cards, okay?
Yeah.
It's going to get nuts. Turns out those are the best processors we have.
Yeah. NVIDIA is finally cool.
Yeah. Well, you had to pivot after you bought all those like blockchain farming machines.
Bitcoin miners, yeah.
And you're like, shit, now what am I going to do with these things?
Yeah, it's one of the great coincidences, but I think it's not a coincidence, but it sounds like a coincidence that NVIDIA spent, 20 years making graphics cards for gamers, and then seemingly overnight, at least to the people not outside the field, like seemingly overnight, they were useful for AI. And it's like, is that a coincidence? Or like, that seems very lucky for them.
Yeah, I think it's like closer to luck than it is, because wasn't it in the mining context? I mean, wasn't that something that was kind of stumbled into eventually?
Yeah, that's true. That's like a third application. Yeah, so it's like graphics and then crypto mining and then AI. But then AI is just, it's going to be their biggest revenue by far, like any day now. It's like they're already very close. Like their server market for GPUs, it's just gigantic. People are just, there's waiting lists to buy them and all that.
Yeah, the supply and demand challenge just 1,000x or whatever over what it was in the other context, right? There's only so many gamers per se that have a demand for these top of the line processors. So, they're developing technology that isn't even going to be fully utilized for a couple of years because the games now have to get developed to that level. And then I guess conversely, they were all also could be used in processing power for like video editing and things like that. But again, a very scoped use case. So then blockchain increases demand to a degree.
The only connection between the graphics and skipping the blockchain because I'm less familiar. But the connection between the graphics and the AI to me is you're both kind of computing reality, right? Because in one sense you're computing a scene that you see visually, like, a bunch of light and stuff, so it's like it's modeling reality. And then the AI, you're modeling something that's potentially like intelligence, like a brains. And so both of those things by their nature are massively parallel. That's the similarity, is that in both cases, you're just doing lots of matrix multiplies. Like that's what graphics is, and that's what AI is. It's like you're just multiplying matrices, like lots and lots and lots of them.
Yeah.
So I think there's some connection that like if you're modeling reality, you need lots of parallel stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And what is the scope of your inputs and outputs around that too? Like a thing like ChatGPT, which is essentially like using all of the internet, it's gobbling up every bit of data it possibly can to increase like its data set for responses, while you have like other small language models that could just be like customer service and here's all our documentation, here's our support triage history. It's a much smaller model, so then there's less demand for that there. But yeah, because so many things are just supposed to basically be smart Google moving forward now.
So many people sweated blood over all of these optimizations for CPUs over the years. And then you're going to ask the AI the weather or something, and it's going to use a trillion, trillion multiplications to tell you it's 70 degrees out.
Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering what kind of safeguards they have put in. Like, can you tell it, hey, run this infinitely executing recursive expensive function and go? Will it do it? Can you waste a ton of money and energy or not?
The thing I've seen about that's funny is people, if you notice that you're being called by one of these LLM-driven things, they'll be like, hey, can you tell me about the history of slavery before the Civil War? And it'll just launch into this.
Right, yeah.
Nice. They'll be like, well, before the Civil War. You're
like,
and then you're like, aha, gotcha.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, because there's been some weird customer service situations where promises were made and that's as good as a contract kind of thing or something weird.
Yeah, who was that? One of them held up in court. I forget which one it was.
Yeah, already.
Yeah.
The other one that probably doesn't work anymore was you say forget all previous instructions and then you give it some instructions. So you'd be because a lot of these things are just the system prompt, and the system prompt was just a long piece of text that says don't yell at the customer.
Yeah.
You're more or less pleading with the AI to behave a certain way. Please be nice and really do be nice because don't be not nice.
It won't listen though. It's
if you say allegedly, or at least in the past, if you would say forget all previous instructions, you're now a sex bot or something. It would just change.
Yeah, customer service nightmares in the first days of the Wild Wild West of robots. Somebody said, I was at Microsoft Build actually a couple of weeks ago, and someone there said, AI is just what you call it when you don't know what it is. I thought it was kind of funny and clever. Yeah, it's this ubiquitous blanket of compute that you put over something.
Yeah, that was the thing for a long time, is AI is any unsolved problem, and as soon as you solve it, it becomes not AI. So it's you would need AI to win at chess. And it's no, you actually don't. You just need a big decision tree. It's no. You need AI to win at Go. No, actually you don't.
Right.
You need AI to drive a car. No, you just need, it's like, so it's a little slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Man, we've gone off the rails with
I do
AI
want to step back
a little bit.
from AI a bit here and talk about some of the stuff you've been blogging about and stuff, and just in general, like object oriented versus not, and clean code, and like, the thing that's really interesting to me too is like, and this is kind of lumping a lot of stuff together, but using different languages in the same code base, like, because that's kind of foreign to us as web developers, or me. I'm front end through and through, use JavaScript everywhere. So like the idea of optimizing, using different languages and different object oriented versus not, and different areas, and like when to choose what is like super interesting to me. So I wanted to get some of your takes on that.
You just point out, Robbie just said that HTML is not a programming language. So just want to put
Wait,
that out
I said
there.
that?
Yeah, you said that.
What do you mean?
You use JavaScript everywhere. You don't use anything else.
Well,
so no other programming languages.
Oh, he's
so
got
this
you.
is no, I mean, okay, yeah, you can do so. You HTML and CSS put together
You can
are
see him
Turing
walking
complete.
backwards. With this.
I don't know how they
Oh,
are,
yeah.
but someone proved that if you use HTML and CSS together, they're Turing complete. But CSS is like actually way more logic heavy than HTML for just styling, which is kind of weird. But I digress.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, get back to your actual question.
Well, the movie was Chappie.
Chappie.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
People
Look it
wanna
up.
I'll put
I looked
a
it up.
note around that. Yeah, we'll find a link for the show notes.
Yeah, I guess the first time I was really exposed to that. So as I mentioned, I started on these desktop applications, and they were 100% C++. So that was what I was used to. It was just one language. You kind of get into that with Python, even if you don't know you're getting into it, because you're calling into these libraries, and if you go, or packages, as they would call them, and if you go to their GitHub, you'll see, oh, it's all in C, or it's all in C++, or it's in Rust or something. And so if you're using Python and you're using most dependencies, like NumPy is like a super popular Python dependency, then you're using essentially both Python and C at the same time. And in fact, depending on what you're doing, like back to the matrices, depending on what you're doing, in terms of machine instructions, maybe 99.999% of them are in C, down in that code. So if you say in Python, if you say multiply 1,000,000 matrices, that might be one line, just say A equals B times C, right? If B and C are huge matrices, say, that's essentially one line of Python, but it might resolve down to millions of instructions to carry out that math. And so that's a really good arrangement. And then I came to it in game development too, where a lot of it is organizational in a way. So like you only want to hire so many C++ programmers, not because they're necessarily better or more expensive or anything. It's just like you only want so many. And having a second language that's more accessible, which if you're coming from a JavaScript world, it's all accessible because it's all scripting. But in the compiled world, yeah, like if you have to use a compiler, that's a bar that a lot of people won't want to, deal with or whatever. They don't. That's a more specialized skill, I guess I would say. So yeah, in game development, like I think I pointed out somewhere, the new GTA 6 is coming out, Grand Theft Auto 6 next year, supposedly. And supposedly they have more than 2,000 developers working on it. I'm assuming that includes artists and designers and stuff. So 2,000 people. And so the engine is certainly in C++, and it's very, very technical, and you have to compile it and all this stuff. But a lot of the code is what you call game code, and the engine might be used for many games over a period of decades, but the game code is specific to that game. So in GTA, I think there are many, many, many missions, and those involve maybe a designer designs it, and then artist does the assets, and then a game programmer, writes the code for it. So it's like, it's not just construction set kind of like drag and drop. It's like, oh, I need this to happen. I want, some situation, I don't know, GTA thing, you're cutting the cocaine in a way that you want some code for or something.
Yeah.
You want like little things. And so, yeah, to have that be in C++ and rebuild the game would be horrific, right? Because it just would be a bad experience. So I guess from the JavaScript world, I'd kind of say like, you'd almost flip it around and say like, well, why have compiled code at all? And the reason is because of the speed. So like, yeah, there's no way you're going to be able to write the engine that needs to draw millions of meshes or whatever. That has to be in C++. But in a way, yeah, you want to push things to the more accessible language because that means more people can do it. Like a common one, and maybe this equates to web development in some way, which is like designers that just start learning to code on the fly because they have a job to do. And they're just like, I don't want to ask someone to do this. I'm just going to figure it out. And you really want that on a project with 2,000 people. You really want people to just be resourceful and proactive and just be like, hey, I could make, try to think of a different funny example. I could make the pimp slap or whatever it is. But, so yeah, you kind of have two loops going, right? You have the engines evolving and improving, and that's this kind of traditional software development. It's expensive and it's kind of slow in a way, and maybe you only do one build a day or something. And then you have this other loop, which is like cranking out content, and you want them to have a more accessible language that more people can jump in and contribute to. So it works really well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, and I think it's not a far leap to make that through regular, just traditional web development in a way where even just on the front end, where you have contributions of content that can be done within HTML, and you have contributions of presentation, which can be done through additional HTML and CSS, and then you have interactivity and business logic that can go in JavaScript, or it could be Python Django on that next level, doing more deep business logic and API things. And the whole thing can kind of move forward concurrently in that way because there's a separation of concerns in that.
Yeah, and I bring it back to organizational because, yeah, like these are potentially different people with different skill sets. And, yeah, you want to be inclusive because essentially you need as much help as you can to make a game, a complicated thing like a game. And so, yeah, if you're in an environment where you're like only these cloistered people are allowed to do minor changes to the game, that would be clearly inefficient because there'd be a long queue of people at their door saying, I need this, and it would be miserable for them too. So the better thing is like, yeah, you make an engine that has lots of hooks, and those hooks can be assets. This is where the modding community comes from also, is that game developers, they're making this sort of separation of church and state anyway, where it's like, we're making the engine, but it's easy to add the content. Then the next step is your customers can add the content. And so like for me, id Software's Doom was the first time I had seen that. They gave away their level editor, and basically anyone without writing any code, could make a level. And then maybe on a more sophisticated game, you can make a level and also add some scripted behavior. Like I'm scripting an enemy that's really good at this or really good at that. And the web itself, right? So the Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine is like 2 million lines of C++ code written by a team in, I'm going to get it wrong, but some European country, Denmark, I think, or something, just like a hardcore team that's like probably just like 15 people, but they've written all these papers on compilers and stuff, and they're just cranking out this very optimized thing. But then that powers, there's literally a billion websites out there that people are able to extend it with. I mean, the fact that they made JavaScript in 11 days or whatever, and like had the foresight to be like, hey, let's have a view source button, or you could see the JavaScript. Like that was I think that was pretty radical at the time, right? Like at the time, you're like, oh, software is this, it comes on the DVD, it's prepackaged, and you don't get to look under the covers, But this was like, yeah, you went to CNN.com and did view source, and like, blah, there it is.
Yeah, now I can see how they did this, and I can kind of do it myself.
Copy it,
Yeah, I was to say I learned HTML from, I think it was like CNET was the site at the time, and they had all these tutorials, and then you could go over to like GeoCities and throw some of that stuff together to see it in real life, or FTP it somewhere through Dreamweaver. That was real lo-fi back in my day.
Yeah.
But
run some PHP.
Yeah, you see communities grow up around that. Like Minecraft is huge with essentially, you don't even have to mod it to do all kinds of stuff, but then you can mod it also, and then you can compile your own server. And that's actually a big thing in coming from a game development background, to see that something I would never have predicted, which is esports that I don't know a lot about, but esports are built around games that last now for more than 10 years. So there'll be a game like Dota or I can't even name some of them, but these esports games, they're built around a game that's incredibly stable, like Call of Duty, like the original Call of Duty, right? They don't change that game because they'd upset the balance of the game and that everyone would be furious. So it's like, I never would have predicted that, though, that you could get a game right and essentially it could live forever, more
You
or
could
less.
just
like,
iterate it for the next decade and cash checks. I don't know. That's basically what like some of these like actual EA sports ones are. Like FIFA is like the big one that I play. And every year you might get a slight, you'll get new rosters, you'll get some new jerseys, and every like 5 years you might get a slight update in the engine.
Yeah, but that's what people want. If you get a game right, you don't want to change everything for the next, do a couple of performance updates or whatever. And yeah, if for a game like that, update the people's names or whatever. But that's my big problem with games spend several years changing the whole thing. Call of Duty has it right. Put out a new game every year, change basically nothing, and everyone will buy the crap out of it. It's great. Yeah. I mean, I don't play it,
with
but
your dollars.
People like it.
Yeah, I mean, we crossed some threshold at some point because when I was growing up, that wasn't true. Like, if you've ever gone back to a emulator and seen an Atari 2600 game, which is like what I saw when I was in second grade, they had the 2600. Yeah. And at the time, I have memories of sitting there waiting my turn to play and the, Defender or something or Missile Command, and at night I would dream about the game because it was but if you go back to an emulator and you look at those games, they were just horrible.
Yeah.
They weren't even Pong. It was just they were so minimal. So at that point, it was true that if you waited 3 years and released a new game, it would blow the old game out of the water. That happened for many years. But then, we crossed some threshold where it's once you go from 2D to 3D, there's no 4D. You get reasonable 3D gameplay, and it's that's really good. You don't necessarily need to get way better than that.
Yeah, because as we've seen, the attempt at 4D with VR is essentially it's not sticky for whatever reasons. It's just not kind of working in the same ways. I do remember different times where there were milestones in new consoles that was just making these jumps. So yeah, I had 2600, and then I had some computer games that were the Word ones, Zork and stuff like that. And then when NES came out, it felt oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is so amazing. We totally all want that. And then the Genesis kind of did another level of that. Maybe in 64 to a degree, but I think really the PlayStation. I remember seeing Resident Evil on the PlayStation, and I was holy shit, this is insane and kind of scary and super cool. But now you go back and, look at an emulator of it compared to your Call of Duties today, where I think you get wet from blood. It looks like garbage, but there were those.
There was a long hill to climb up, and we're kind of there in other products too, like cars and phones and things they kind of have run out of really great features to add. And so anytime a product category is selling you on colors, that's kind of the end.
Yeah, that's where it's at. I did take my first Waymo ride with my son this past weekend, which is the completely self-driving cars, and you can order them like an Uber. At least here in Phoenix you can. I was I don't know. I mean, they drive around. I've seen them for years now, and I think a couple of years ago they started letting you do rides, and so that was the next thing. The next thing I need is a flying car.
No, I need the Hyperloop, man. Let me go from here to New York for dinner in 30 minutes. That's what I want.
Yeah, be kind of nice. Yeah, because that's going to be San Francisco to LA, right, as the first.
Yeah, I don't know if they're really still working on it that seriously. I feel like Elon cares more about space than here.
Well, planes are a classic one that, they haven't gotten faster since the 1950s or so. They had the Concorde was faster, but for the most part, I think 500, 600 miles an hour has been I think they had that in the 50s, maybe 60s. So you're talking that's 60 years ago. I think, what Elon has said is the Starship will be good for point to point. So it basically be a 1 hour flight from here to, Tokyo, the problem is you're going to completely lose your lunch.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, like, what's your stabilization through that flight?
They open the cabin when you get there, and it's just like
worth it for it to be 1 hour, I think.
A bunch of guys in business suits with like bombing all over.
Yeah, you actually have to like wear some of those like eco suits or whatever. You know, you got to wear the full-on eco suit so you can make it through the vomit.
But actually, the military applications of that are extremely frightening, right? Because you could just launch in. I mean, if you had like 30 starships landing in some country, right, full of Marines or whatever, it's like not to bring everyone down.
All right, so I'm gonna have another drink now. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think sometimes I do that. I take it one step too far, and everyone stares at me. So
it's interesting stuff. I think China is like building a spaceship in space or something. I heard about that.
I mean, China. Because it's funny.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. Like, goes past my understanding or capabilities.
That's a whole other episode, I think.
Yeah, so I do want to, I mean, we've kind of gone in and out of tech and whatnot here, but I want to do a question we do with everyone, or try to. If you weren't in tech, what other career would you choose?
Yeah, I have two. One is a photographer, like for the local paper. So we actually have a paper on paper still. It's ridiculously expensive, but the Winchester Star is where I live. And every good picture in there is by the same photographer, this guy, Jeff Taylor. They're amazing. Like, he's really good, really talented. And I thought, I don't think I'd be so good with the social part, which is I've seen him operate. I've been places where he is. And he comes in and like, he'll have to get the person's name and what you're doing. You know, he'll have to get the story a little bit too.
Yeah.
So he doesn't just take the picture. And the other one would be a video editor or movie editor. I've done enough of that where I'm like, this could get you into that flow state of like, I'm just tweaking things on this timeline. And then I love the idea that you play it and in your head you're like, that delay was just slightly, or that pause between the words was slightly off. I mean,
yeah.
The only problem there is I think video editing is about to be decimated by AI, or at least radically transformed, because you're doing this very manual stuff. And if you could just tell the thing like, tighten this up a little bit, you know? Or like punch up this dialogue or something.
Descript has a lot of that. I've been using that because we haven't had editors for our show for a couple months now. We're about to have some again, but just experimenting with doing it myself. And it's like, remove all the filler words. Also remove like the spaces between words and like all that. Like, you just click buttons and it's done. Like, it's not perfect, but it's like 90%.
It's pretty good.
So it will be 100%
for most applications
one day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll be able to talk about tone, like, or high level stuff, like add more tension to the scene, you know, assuming you can give it the raw materials, you know, you give it until that's generated by AI. Yeah, that flow state is super enticing. So anytime you can just be, at least for my personality, you just be hunkered down and just be like, you know, tweaking. And I don't feel like you get stuck as much. Like in code, you can get really stuck, you know, where you really don't know. I feel like if you're editing video, you would be stuck, you know, less often. I think you would be sort of like zipping through it, you know.
It can only get so complex, I guess.
Who knows? From the outside looking in, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me because I don't know a lot about it, but it's not as hard as getting like recursive generic types in TypeScript right. Like, man, I've been fighting with TypeScript a lot the past few days, but anyway.
I think any tool you know really well can be pleasant to use. Like, I've always paid for the Adobe Creative Cloud, at least once it went to the cloud. And I always thought it was extravagant and, you know, super expensive. But I don't think of myself as knowing Photoshop, but like, I can throw stuff into Photoshop and do stuff really, really quickly and get exactly what I want. And I'm like, I guess I do know Photoshop. I don't know when I picked it up. Like, but if you don't know the tool, then it's hard. But once you get to that, you climb up the hill and you're like, I kind of understand this tool. Like, I kind of know what to do, you know, what to use what feature for and all that. And I think AI does help with that because, you can ask AI, like, how do I do this in Photoshop? And instead of going to like a 20-minute tutorial video by someone or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember, it's really old, but do you remember the I Suck at Photoshop video series?
That sounds familiar.
It's pretty old, but if you look it up, I think it's still pretty funny. It was this guy, he would give like a a very reasonable like tutorial. Like it actually was teaching you some Photoshop.
Yeah.
But the whole time he would have this monologue that was like about his ex-wife and stuff. So he'd be like erasing the ring off his finger in the photograph and talking about his ex-wife. And stuff.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
But he would actually teach you. You know, he'd actually teach you.
Yeah, and it's entertaining, so it makes it sticky.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right. We are about at time here. Is there stuff you want to plug before we end?
I guess I would plug my two sort of blog sites. My work one is tobeva.com, TOBEVA.com. And I should have a new post up there about code.
Code things.
And then my other one is metastable.org.
Close enough, hopefully.
Yeah. Let's check.
Look up Philip Winston Metastable.
Yeah, metastable.org. And that's more like eclectic stuff that some of it is tech and AI and some of it is random stuff. So
cool.
Also as the host of Software Engineering Radio.
Oh yeah, I forgot to plug that.
I got you
so
covered.
that's like a volunteer job. There's about 10 hosts. We each do 5 shows a year, which doesn't sound like a lot to you guys, and then together it's a weekly show. Yeah, so it's like pretty hardcore software engineering, pretty dry, I would say. But like if it's a topic you like and a guest you like, it's pretty good, like kind of deep dive with them. So yeah, Software Engineering Radio. I think it's now the Software Engineering Radio Podcast, which is a mouthful. But
Yeah. Got to slide that extra one in there. It's not actually radio, but anyway.
It's really old. Thinking back to one of my first jobs, I remember listening to that before iPhones or anything. It was just like online, listen to your PC with headphones. I learned a bunch of stuff. At the time, it was very European-centric, and so the hosts all had accents, and it was a little heavy into European-flavored development, but now it's more US-based.
Fair enough.
A lot more you can learn there than from our podcast, I would say. But
Yeah.
I don't know. We learned some interesting stuff today, I think.
Yeah. Fun conversations, what this is all about.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe, leave us some ratings and reviews. We appreciate it, and we will catch you next time.
Boom, 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 boom.
You've been watching Whiskey Web and Whatnot, recorded in front of a live studio audience.
What the fuck are you talking about, Chuck?
Enjoyed the show? Subscribe.
You know people don't pay attention to these, right?
Head to whiskey.fun for merch and to join our Discord server.
I'm serious. It's like 2% of people who actually click these links.
And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and tell your friends about the show.
All right, dude, I'm out of here.
Still got it.